Welcome to Consulting Mastery, where we help B2B consultants master the business of consulting. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Ahmed. Join us as we explore the art of delivering outstanding client value, earning a higher income, and thriving in today's marketplace. Hey folks, welcome back to Consulting Mastery. Before we get you to this week's episode, I wanted to let you know that we have a live workshop coming up on power positioning for consultants. If you want to learn the exact same framework that we teach our clients inside 90-Day Pipeline of how to position themselves as the one and only indisputable choice in their markets, attract perfect clients, and command premium fees, you can do so on our live workshop at powerpositioningworkshop.com. It's just $49 to join us, and you can grab your seat at powerpositioningworkshop.com. With that, here's this week's episode.
So here we are recording this episode on the last final day of 2024. Big day. This year is ending, and we are getting ready to step into a brand new shiny year. And I think that makes it a great time to talk about how to do that in a way that is going to set us all up for the best kind of success. And to me, what is at the base of all that always is your plan, and your plan is driven from your goals. And what we know working with folks, not just at the end of a year or the beginning of a year, but throughout their journey, is that goal setting can be a challenging thing. It can be either exceptionally valuable. It can really drive a business. It can drive a founder. It can, push you in the right direction, or it can be something that gets you caught in the quicksand. And so let's talk today about how to use goals in a way that are truly going to benefit the folks who are listening.
My biggest worry for people at this time of year is that they just don't, not everybody, but a lot of folks aren't taking the time to even reflect on what they're trying to achieve. And so to me, like we're going to talk a lot about goal setting mistakes. Mistake number one, not having them.
Yes.
Right. And I don't mean necessarily that you haven't sat down and written out your goals and quantified them. And I want you to do all those things, by the way, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But if you have no real conception of what you're trying to achieve for the year, it's a symptom of a bigger problem, which is a lack of clarity on what you want out of life, right? Like forget business, for example. Hopefully you're the kind of person that, the business serves your life and not the other way around. But if you can't, will not, cannot, or don't have the clarity to sit down and actually think about what you want to achieve in 2025 for the business, that strikes me as a deeper problem. And I just don't know that despite your, perhaps intentions for the year of things being different and seeing some change and better results, I don't know those intentions go very far unless you can really get, down to brass tacks and put something on paper that you want to achieve.
Yeah, and you make a really good point that I want to swing back to, which you said you want to get clear on what you want to achieve. And I also heard you talk about, having the business serve your life and all of that great stuff. And when I see people have ineffective goals, right, and which leads to ineffective plans, which leads to ineffective outputs, what often is missing is they start too far along in the process. Because in my mind, what is more important than the what you're going to accomplish, and we talk about this all the time, is the why. And if I think back to my, corporate career, and most folks who have moved into consulting, right, have lived in the corporate world, they've found their expertise somewhere. They've probably been part of this, annual planning cycle that every organization has. And when I think back and reflect on that, what was really interesting is that those plans were often plans that were built in, November, December, and then they were focused on for a couple of months, and then they kind of fell off the rails. And I would say that the same thing that happened in those organizations is the thing that happens to the folks that we work with, which is you're starting so far away from the why. You're starting from a place of, oh, okay, it's January 1st. I better have a plan, right? I need a plan. And yeah, you may look back and see what you did last year and then, add a percentage to it. You're going to do whatever you do to actually figure out the nuts and bolts of the plan. But what organizations fail to do, what individuals fail to do, is to set aside the planning part altogether for a minute and remember why they're doing this in the first place, right? Why do you even need a plan? Not just what are you trying to accomplish in terms of revenue, but what's the purpose? Why are you here? What do you want for your clients and your future clients? What do you want for yourself? What do you want for your family? What does all of that look like? And I can guarantee you that if you spend even just a bit of time reflecting on that, thinking about that, writing that down, you're going to come up with a very different plan than if you just jump into a spreadsheet right away.
And I'll give you, depending on what stage of business you're at, I'll give you a few different prompts to think about this. If you're early stage consulting and you're in that kind of maybe feast and famine cycle, you're a solo consultant where sometimes you have work and sometimes you don't, and that's kind of a bit of an existential threat to the business. Is if you don't have enough work, then the business goes belly up. I want you to really think about, why are you consulting? Why are you in business? For us, if somebody says to us, in the enrollment process, that if they could go out and get a job, they get a job and close down their consulting business, we don't take on that client. That's a red flag, because that tells me that they're not committed enough to the consulting business and to being in business to do what it takes to succeed in consulting. And so if you're in that stage right now where things are tough and it's your early stage and it's feast and famine and revenue is unstable, good time to check in on, hey, why am I even in this game? Why am I consulting? Why am I an entrepreneur? Why don't I go get a job? Like, what's keeping me in this? What's the reason why I started doing this? What's the upside of this? Check in with that purpose and that why, because you're going to need it to stay the course. Versus if you're later stage, more mature, more revenue, perhaps you have a team. You want to think about, what are you building? Don't make the mistake, and I've been there, of just getting caught up in going through the motions. And that can be really easy to do, that as you grow your business, it becomes more complex. There are more moving parts. There's more to do. It's really easy to just get stuck in going through the motions of running the business without really reflecting on where it's going and what you're trying to achieve. So a couple of prompts there, just depending on where you're at in business, to reflect on the why and the purpose.
Yeah. And if we think about like the topic of our conversation today, which is goal setting, right? And how to build that plan. The other uncomfortable truth is that your plan's not likely going to stay static for 12 months, right? Like, wouldn't that be great if you could just set it in January, set it and work towards it for the next 12 months? That is not true for most people most of the time, right? Things are going to change. The market's going to change. What your offer might shift in some way. There's going to be all these things around you that are changing. And being clear on why you're doing this is the difference between you just saying, oh, well, that was a great plan that I built, I'm just going to chuck it now and go back to just kind of being bounced around, blown about by the wind, or being able to say, okay, this thing isn't quite the way I predicted it was going to be, but I still have this solid, foundation that I'm working towards, the thing that I'm trying to do. Now, all I need to do is make adjustments. And that not only ensures that you're, you end up with a better plan, it also is the thing that sort of saves your sanity as you're working your way through tumultuous times, right? Which is what businesses can feel like often.
Yeah. And I think folks reflecting on 2024 and previous years, you can see that for yourself, right? It wouldn't have made a lot of sense to have a very rigid plan in January, because everything that happened in 2024 was largely unknown to you. You didn't have a crystal ball. You couldn't tell the future. And so you had to adapt based on the challenges and the circumstances that 2024 brought. And 2025 will be no different. Hopefully there's more opportunity. Like, we certainly wish everybody a good, strong, prosperous, healthy 2025. But what I can guarantee you is we don't know what it's going to bring. None of us has a crystal ball. So being rigid is certainly not the intent here. Being clear about what you want is the intent.
So hopefully we've convinced everyone, right, to get clear on that intent. Let's talk about what makes good goals or makes bad goals, wherever you want to start.
You go first.
Sure. So I think I'm going to start with mistakes, because often it's easier to define what could go wrong, right, than what can go right. And there's no end of templates and, processes and blah, 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 all the things that you can go through to structure what your goals look like. But, I would say that the first thing that really gets people in trouble is not then connecting their goals to their purpose. I feel like there's so much chatter and noise out there, right? If you're paying attention, around like how to build it, and here are the 3 steps to a great goals, and here's how you're going to be successful in the coming year by filling out this particular template. And even people who are clear on their purpose struggle to link their goals to that purpose. And so, the first thing I would say is just be cognizant of that. If you're somebody who is getting into business because your focus, the thing you want to optimize for in the coming year is revenue, right? Revenue. You're willing to work as hard as it takes. You've got agreement from your family that that's what things are going to look like. You are striving towards a certain financial goal, and that is really your focus and what you're optimizing for. Then get clear and build your goals and everything behind it in that way, versus if you're somebody who is in a season of life where you have young kids and you have certain responsibilities and you have a certain amount of time that you can truly give, and you want to optimize for using that time in the best possible way, right? And you have a particular revenue goal that you want to meet, but maybe it's not blow the doors off this year. Maybe it is, meet goal A, B, or, target A, B, and C. Then build your goals in that way. There is no one way to do this. And, the thing that's going to keep you connected is knowing that the goals that you've built are truly driving you in the direction you want, not the way that you are told you should. And if you're on social media, you're hearing all the startup bros talk about, rise and grind and 10x this and yada, yada. And that's fine if that's the thing you want. But for most people, for most mature adults who are at this stage in their careers that the folks we are working with are, there's more to it than that. And you need to, be conscious of building goals that are meeting the objectives that you truly want, and not the ones that are kind of out there floating around and creating a bunch of noise around you.
It's funny. You talk to somebody who, young family, 2, 3, 4 kids, just got laid off, starting a consulting business. What's your revenue goal for the first year? $1 million. What?
Yeah.
What do you, and that's the disconnect that you're speaking to here, is where like there's a reality of where you're at. I think that's another separate point to make. Like, be aware of where you are. Let's come back to that in a second, right? But that person likely doesn't want to completely neglect their family in the interest of getting to $1 million. And so I think it's important to understand, to your point, Carrie, that goals also have consequences. And you need to be aware of what the consequences are of the goals you're setting, and how that, ties into your why and your purpose and the season of life you're in.
Mm-hmm.
I had this conversation, I think, as recently as this past weekend with my wife when I was thinking about 2025. And I said, look, I want to travel. I want to speak on stages. I want to be more out there. I want to do this, that, and the other. And I'm not going to do any of it. Because traveling and being away from my kids is not what I want in this season. So, my message to her was, there's so many things I could do right now to grow the business, to get to the next level, to expand my footprint, and get to the next level in terms of thought leadership, that I'm just not willing to do, because the compromises are not compromises I'm willing to make right now. And I said, when the kids are older, different story. That might be the time for me personally. I'm not saying you should think this way, but I'm speaking personally. That might be the time for me to do all these other things. But now's not the season, and that's going to get built into my goals.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, overarching message here, know the why, right? What are you here to do? Decide to have goals at all, right? Like, commit yourself to doing that and connect the two. And, even if you stop listening right now, and don't, please, because there's more to come. But even if you stop listening right now, that's going to get you a long way if you truly think your way through that. But let's talk about the smaller things, the insidious little challenges that throw people off their goal game.
Well, I just want to make a quick point about knowing where you're at. I think that bears some emphasis. A lot of folks like to put on their rose-colored glasses and kind of ignore the current circumstances, and I get, I get the intent behind it, right? Like, let's think big, let's dream, let's not tie our goals down by our current circumstances, and there's some merit in that discussion, but also own where you're at. Like, be hyper aware of your current circumstances, of your current reality, of your current challenges, and own it. I think you do yourself an extreme disservice by kind of ignoring your current circumstances and ignoring the reality of your situation and pretending that it doesn't exist. That's just going to set you up for disappointment. I think you have to really, number one, think big. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure, and have compelling goals that are motivating to you, and be really clear on where you are right now. To use a very dated, tired metaphor, it's the GPS metaphor. You got to know where you are specifically, like know the coordinates, and you've got to know where you want to go specifically to have any chance of arriving.
Yeah, let me add to that. And I said, let's start with what throws people off, but let's start with what makes people successful instead, which is exactly what you're doing, right? But adding to that, know where you are is one thing. The other thing you need to own is who you are. And, to illustrate this is always interesting when you and I sit down to talk about goals, right, for the business, because we approach it in very different ways. And knowing if you are somebody who needs to set the big, audacious, insane goal and work towards that because that's the thing that gets you motivated, versus are you the person who needs to set a goal that you truly believe is doable, right? There's nuance there depending on how your brain works. And so also understand that, because if you are the person who needs to see a goal that is achievable, maybe a stretch goal, but that you believe you can get to, setting yourself a goal of, moving from $100,000 in revenue to $1 million in revenue in the next 6 months is going to paralyze you. And on the flip side, if you're someone who needs that, crazy moonshot goal ahead of you, and you shrink yourself down to the thing that you feel is, that the people around you feel is possible, or, in whatever other way you limit yourself, again, you're going to do yourself a disservice. So all of the, there's merit in any way of doing this that fits where you are and who you are.
So I have a question for you on this, and I don't know that I have a coherent answer to this. I'm hoping you do. Is there a maturity angle to that? Is there an argument that the earlier you are in business, the less ambitious your goals should be, because you need to get in some reps of actually achieving goals and developing confidence, and then the later on you are in business, the more you could be a little more ambitious because you have the confidence to be able to follow through? Is that something You think it's true, or?
I think it's true. And I think there's layers, right? Because there's like what you're talking about is where you are in the evolution of your business, but there's also just the like baked in personality component.
Mm.
And to me, those are the two things that need to combine. And, even if you're early on, you talked about the person who's just getting started and wants to make $1 million this year, that might not be the appropriate goal for them, like the true on paper goal, but they may need to wake up every day in order to get themselves out of bed and do all the hard things that need to be done, right? They may need to wake up every day with that vision of that $1 million, right? They may need to have that thing that maybe deep down inside, if they had to put it into their spreadsheet, they know that it's probably not doable, but it still has to be the thing that exists for them. So I don't know that I know the answer. I'm no psychologist, but I think there are two components of it. And yes, I absolutely believe that will evolve as your business matures, and quite frankly, probably evolves one way or another as you mature. But it could also be that as your business matures, you could be someone who becomes more kind of realistic and conservative. I don't know, but I think both of those things really need to be in your view, and you need to get clear on what they are for you.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of early stage folks that just need the confidence that comes from following through.
Mhm.
But to your point, it's a very personal thing. Like if you're the kind of person who can set a big goal, fall short, but still be satisfied with your progress and be able to push through and set the next one, that's fine. I just see a lot of people that need the confidence that comes from following through on a goal or an objective.
Well, and what we're potentially sidling up to here is the difference between the goal and the plan, right? Because having the goal, the vision, which is I'm going to make $1 million in the next 12 months or get to $1 million run rate by month 12, that's different than doing the math, right? And when you're actually carving out, okay, like what are the actual steps I need to take, right? What are the tasks I need to do? What is the funnel going to look like? That might be a slightly different thing, and that's okay. And so there's also probably just some semantics there around, the vision, the goal from a visionary perspective, and the kind of mathematical goal that you're working towards. The other thing I would say, and I'm a big fan of this, is working in ranges, because we often have this need to like set the number, right? And it always comes down to a number in the end, but like, what is the number? And I also think it's okay to have your, what, this is where, not okay, better than okay, smart. This is where I'd like to be. This is where I'll be okay. And this is where I would love to land, right? And having that range so that you're both giving yourself the stretch and being able to, do the hard mathematical calculations to get you to a place that is going to, pay your bills and do all the things that you need to, both in your business and personally.
Do you want to get into the how to set goals
Let's do
piece
it.
now? So you kind of segued really well into that, because I think about it in three ways. So I'll give you my personal how I think about setting goals at a time like this. So one is what I'm going to call the vision. That is the grand big picture, what I want to experience out of life. And it is not time bound, and it is not tactical, and it is not quantifiable. It is, a really at its core, it is a visualization of what I want to experience out of life for myself and for my family and people that I care about, and what I want to provide and what I want to experience. It's that. That's my North Star. This is what's important to me. And I have a very clear, vivid, specific image of that in my mind that I revisit regularly. And to me, the beginning of a new year is a good time to re-engage that vision, that picture, that visualization. And that's my North Star. That's what grounds me. And then I like to have both a quantitative and some qualitative goals for the year. So heading in 2025, yes, I want a number. I think about it more as a concrete number, but I'm all for the range. I don't have any issues with that. I think about it as a specific number or numbers rather around, number one, I like to define what I want my income to be for the year. And then from that, and that's driven by, what I want to get out of life for the year, what's going to get me to my goals, what do I want to experience, so on and so forth, right? From there, I want to reverse engineer what the business needs to earn in order to generate that income. And top down, bottom up, I mean, I like to approach it in both ways. Like I'll look at it top down, look at it bottom up, and see what makes sense. So I don't have a big preference on how folks approach this. There's no right or wrong answer there. I'll look at it both ways. Top down, revenue to income, bottom up, income to revenue. I'm going to look at it both ways and see what makes sense. But I'm going through this quantitative analysis of, what needs to happen to deliver on the numbers, revenue for the business, and then income for myself, the founder. And then I'll have some qualitative goals. So this will be things like health. I call them qualitative, although those can be quantitative in their own right. But health, balance, how much I want to work, experiences. So I'll have those goals that complement the quantitative revenue goal, so that I'm not, in a position where I am, full tilt pursuing a revenue goal and an income goal at the expense of all the other facets of life. So I call them qualitative, and that's probably a poor label, but it's like the non-business goals that make life meaningful, comprehensive, fulfilling, etc. That's my personal approach.
Yeah. And I think it's solid for sure. The other thing I'll say, just because I'm on this theme of like know thyself, right? Is also understand how detailed and in depth or high level you need your goal to be. And I know you well enough to kind of understand where that lands for you. And I think what you're saying makes perfect sense. There are folks who need to, just for the like exercise of it, go into a whole ton of detail because it gives them a sense of comfort, of confidence, that they've thought it through. And there are people who are fine with, as long as I have those top line pieces, some of the things that you talked about in place, I'm ready to go. The other thing that I want to add, because we're talking specifically about the goal setting today, but what I want for everyone who's listening is them to have goals and a plan that works, right? That carries them through the coming year or whatever time frame, because we're talking about January 1st. It's convenient. It's tomorrow. But this can happen at any point. You don't have to wait until January to start your plan. But the other thing that's truly important, and it links back to everything you're saying, is really building in time to reflect on how things are going, right? To have a cadence, the simple way is to do it monthly, or, to have a quarterly review and then a monthly kind of check-in, whatever cadence works for you, but to have a cadence in place where you are checking in, you're making sure that all of the vision that you put in place and the assumptions that you made still make sense, and you're making the refinements as you go. Because the other truth about goal setting is it's not a one-shot deal, right? And so to make this a living, breathing, dynamic exercise, that's also what's going to help it be something that lasts, right? As opposed to something that you create and then you put in a file somewhere and you never see it again, or you remember fondly, right, the day that I created those goals, but you don't really, take the action that you need and make the adjustments that you need to make.
And we'll talk a little bit more about quarterly planning and how to think about that and turning, your goal into a more concrete quarterly plan in the next episode. But, to your point, I think something that's really important to clarify here is you at this level, I would start to break down your goal into quarterly milestones once you have it. So if you want to make $1 million for the year, just an arbitrary number, I would start thinking about, seasonality. And particularly if you're, a little more experienced, if you don't have a lot of data to make this these decisions, then that's fine. Don't, right? But if you know, for example, that Q1's a big quarter for your business, Q4 is a big quarter for your business, then you might want to be more aggressive in Q1 and Q4. It might not be, make 250 per quarter, right? It might be do 300 or 400 in Q1 and Q4 and account for a bit of a lull in Q2 and Q3 if that's reflective of the seasonality of your business. I'm not suggesting you make this up or assume Q1 and Q4 are going to be your best quarters, but if you know that from experience, you might want to build that in. So consider, is it a straight line? Like I will have the same revenue goal every single quarter for the year, which if you don't have a lot of experience or a lot of data, I would suggest you just start there. But if you have the data to show, seasonality in the business and you have certain quarters that are stronger, you can build that in. And then once you have that, heads down, plan for the quarter. And we'll talk more about that in a coming episode.
Yeah. So that sounds like a good place to leave it. We've left folks with a lot to think about, and they can come back and see us next week for, some more conversation about how to turn this into something that's really going to drive you through quarter after quarter, month after month.
See you there.
See you there. Happy New Year.